Hello guys, and welcome to a new Wargame video today by me, Vulcan. Today I'm looking at the PACT logistics vehicles after last time looking at the NATO logistics vehicles. Now I've decided to do it this way after a suggestion from Boogie3 that I should go straight to the PACT variants of the same units. And the reason for that is it makes it a lot easier to compare, and it means that I will both go through NATO and PACT at the same rate, instead of, for those of you who play PACT, waiting until after I've done all of the NATO units. So I thought doing it this way would be a lot more fair. Also, the PACT logistics vehicles aren't too diverse, so I can get through them reasonably quickly, and today I wanted to share my thoughts with you, especially considering there was some controversy in the last video. So, to start off with, I'm just going to go through a few of the units. The first one is the UAZ that I want to look at. This is the same as every other UAZ variant that you can get from any nation, from Russian, Czech, Polish and East German, sorry. Now these all have exactly the same stats. They are your normal command jeeps. They have the small size, and they have 70 km/h speed, which is roughly 40 kilometers slower than the fastest NATO Jeep that you can get, which was the Iltis Kado. So it's a decent vehicle if you need something that can hide in small places. Now, in the last video, there was controversy about me talking about the size of the units. Size does affect the ability of another unit to hit your unit. So if it's small, it has a less chance to hit. However, a lot of people overlook that size also refers to the level of cover at which a unit can hide in, not stealth. Stealth is completely different. The level of cover, for example, small, this means that they can hide in low grass, and they can also hide in hedges. Whereas something that is big, for example, or medium size, can't hide in hedges as easily. Also, it refers to the fact that you maybe can hide better in forests. But the big difference is, with stealth, it's the detection range. And you can see that every single command vehicle, if I just hover over them all, they all have poor stealth. So if they differentiated between the level of cover at which you could hide in, then they would vary. But they don't, because it doesn't affect it. So that's what size does. And that is my logical conclusion to how that works. Now I've got that out of the way, I'm going to be moving on to the other vehicles. The BMP-1K. This is the first Russian logistic vehicle that you can get. It's well armed with HDGMs, which is incredibly crazy. It's one of two command vehicles that actually are armed with HDGMs, I believe. Actually, no, make that 3. Any more? Nope, doesn't look like it. So it's one of 3 command vehicles that actually have HDGMs on them. And they aren't very accurate, but they can be reasonably useful for defending against close range armour. So for example, if this vehicle gets caught out, then at least you have an HGM that you can know is going to hit at close range to defend itself, even though it only has an AP power of 10, but at close range it will probably still do a decent amount of damage. Now obviously it's not kinetic, so the AP power doesn't scale, so please bear that in mind. It's always going to do 10 damage, and depending on the armour of the opposing vehicles, it may not even do that much damage. Now it does have 2 front armour, 1 top armour, 1 rear armour and 1 side armour. This means that it's not going to be taken out by those artillery shots that could blow up nearby, so it can't be affected by AoE as such, but it will die quickly to direct hits because that isn't very high armour. Now it does have a speed of 60 km/h. It's not going to be getting out of the way of faster units very easily, like some of the French tanks, but it is a lot faster than some of the slower APCs. So bear that in mind. It has a slower road speed than a lot of vehicles at 110 kilometers per hour. So if you're trying to fast move it away, it probably get caught up to. Has a strength of 10 though, which is quite good for a command vehicle. If you look at the Jeeps, they only have a strength of 5, which allows them to be destroyed very easily, whereas strength of 10 normally takes a few more hits to kill. Now, after the BMP 1K, you have the BRM 1K. Now, the difference between these two vehicles, they're pretty much the same, and they look very, very similar. But the biggest difference is the BRM is a scout vehicle, and you can see the optics is the main difference. So you go from poor optics with the BMP 1K to exceptional optics with the BRM 1K. And you also lose the HDGM armament, but you keep the auto cannon. So the reason I would suggest you take this over the BMP 1K is not only will the HDGMs not give you away, but you can put this command vehicle on the edge of a forest and also use it as recon. This is really useful for spotting units that could potentially come and destroy your command vehicle. So it's kind of saving itself in a way, and with the exceptional recon you're going to be spotting units and be able to save your command vehicle much easier. Now I'm not saying put it at the front lines and use it as recon. I'm saying leave it at the back of a sector, but in a tree line or a bunch of bushes, sit on the edge of and scout your own little area around the CV. Now again, it still has the same speed and same road speed, so there's that to consider, and of course has the one top and side armour. Now the T-72, we get into one of the first PACT command tanks. This only costs 200 points and does host 11 front armour, which is decent, 6 side armour, 3 rear armour and 2 top armour. Now it does have a gun which can fire 1925 meters, which doesn't do a great deal of damage and is not very accurate at all. The only way that this gun is decent is at close range, because the accuracy is just abysmal. And because obviously it's kinetic rounds, it's going to do more damage at close range as well. So the best place to put these kind of tanks is in a contested sector where there's a lot of tree lines. And this means that if anyone pushes into the tree line with tanks, this can at least defend itself against enemy armoured units. Not so much about against infantry. Any tank or APC that comes across infantry in a forest situation is likely to get destroyed. So always make sure that you have defense as well for these kinds of units. Otherwise, they will always die. If they come across enemy infantry, that is. So, again, same speed as the BRM and the BMP. Same road speed, 110 kilometers per hour. And it can get around quite a lot with the fuel capacity of 1,000 litres. But it's good for contesting sectors and cannot get bombed very easily at all. Also, napalm will not affect it, and furthermore, it's going to be hard to get to with any kind of planes if you're hiding it in a forest. Moving on to the T-80UK. This is the most significant command tank in the entire game. It has 20 front armour. That is ridiculous. 9 side armour, 3 top armour and 3 rear armour. This is the perfect tank for pushing up with your other units. I believe if I skip to the tanks on the PACT side, the T-80U also shares the same arm value, so you don't even get a downgrade from the armour. It's exactly the same. You still get the really, really powerful reflex guided missile, which is incredibly powerful against heavy tanks and any light armour. And you also have a powerful cannon with an accuracy of 8 and an AP power of 20. This is really good for taking out NATO heavy armour, including medium armour of course, and basically any armoured vehicle will just disintegrate to this cannon. Now it does have a speed of 75 kilometers per hour, which is very, very fast for a tank, and we've got a road speed of 110 kilometers per hour like the other units. Got a fuel capacity of 1,250 litres, and it has the same autonomy as the T-72, and a strength of 10 of course, like most tanks share. So it's going to be very, very good for keeping in the front lines. Now this is especially a good tank for those kind of pushes over a hill, for example. So you push up with your main tanks and you go over the hill into a sector, and then you bring this one up just behind, and it will be able to provide its own fire support, although it will be targeted a lot because obviously it's a command vehicle. But it's only actually 50 points more expensive than the actual T-80Us. Actually, let me just check. I believe the T-80U actually is worth 170 points, and so it's worth 80 points more, sorry. So that is quite significant, and it will get focused, so please bear that in mind. As soon as somebody sees a command tank of a T-80UK, they're going to bring in all they can to destroy it, because it's going to give them a huge amount of points. So it's likely that it will come under fire from enemy aircraft if it's not in cover, using guided ATGMs. So make sure it has air cover. That's probably the biggest issue with the T-80U. It's not going to get flanked very easily because by ground units, because it's so powerful itself, and it will be able to deal with that kind of thing. But if it comes across attack from helicopters or air units or jets, then it might get taken out. So moving on to the BRDM-2U, one of my favourite command vehicles from Wargame European Escalation, because it's so fast, it's got all the armour you need, and it's small, and it gets out of the way. And also, another good thing to note about the BRDM-2U is it has a high availability in decks, so you can bring in quite a lot of them. For example, the BRDM-2U, you can bring in about 8 of, I believe, if you bring them on your deck, depending on the availability that you choose. And the BRM-1K, you can bring in like 4. So you get more of these. But the reason for that is they don't have any armament themselves. But like I said, they are well armoured, and they won't give away their own position. Now you can get the BTR-70K as well. This comes with a 14.5mm machine gun on it with 2 front armour and the same speed. Now I would never recommend upgrading to this because it costs 20 points more, and you're basically getting a command vehicle that does exactly the same thing but is not as mobile, because the BTR-70K actually has a worse autonomy, and this machine gun is never going to be greatly useful against anything that may find it. So you're better off sticking with the BRDM-2U and defending it well. Now, we got the VSOT 64A R2, this first Czech command vehicle. A very fast command vehicle again, 95 kilometers per hour. Exactly the same pretty much as the BRDM-2U, except for it has a medium size and medium optics. So you get a little bit of an upgrade on the optics, but it's a little bit bigger. So you're not going to be able to hide it in as many levels of cover. Then you got the VSOT 64A RM2. This is a slightly upgraded version. It's basically exactly the same hull, except for it has a machine gun on the top. That's the only difference there. Then we got the BVP 1K. This has this is the third vehicle which has an ATGM. It's basically exactly the same as the BMP 1K. So basically take in mind what I said for the BMP1, and if you've got a Czech deck, then you can decide to use this if you want to. The T55 K1, this is a cheaper command tank, the cheapest that you can get on the PACT side. It has 7 front armour, 3 side armour. Not the best, but useful for holding old sectors safely. so it's never going to be able to be command sniped by bombs, by people guessing where your command vehicle is. Especially in ranked, this can come in very, very handy, because a lot of times people will try and snipe your command vehicles with random low-cost bombers that can basically take out your tanks very, very easily, or command vehicles that are only armoured by 1 armour. Now, yes, this tank only has 1 top armour, but in terms of explosive bombs going off next to it, unless they get a lucky direct hit, it's not gonna kill the tank very easily. And of course it still has that strength of 10, which will keep it alive reasonably easily against the damage of bombs. So you've also got a fuel capacity of 1,360 litres, which gives it an autonomy of 700 kilometers, which is very, very, very good and will never really run out of fuel. So you can move around the map into all the different sectors you need it to be in. Then we got the Scott 3. This is exactly the same as the VSOT 64A that you get for the Czech, but it's obviously a Polish unit, so you can use it for Polish decks. You then have the Topaz R2M. This comes with a recoilless rifle, which is very, very good for defending itself against infantry at close range. Now, I really like the use of recoilless rifles for taking out infantry, especially with Topaz APCs, that I think they suit their role very, very well, because the explosives stun infantry very, very easily. So these are good for defending against special forces, for example. Now, it does have a medium size and medium optics. Stealth is obviously poor on all of the CVs, so I'm never going to really cover that. We got the 60 km/h speed, which is okay. It's not as good as some command vehicles, for example the Scots and the BRDM, but it's still decent enough. And with the defense it has with the recoilless rifle, it's going to save itself more than a few times against enemy infantry that may sneak upon it. Also, with the stunning power of this cannon, is you're going to be able to give your CV time to retreat and then use your defensive forces that should be nearby to help out. So it has the armor you need to defend from bombs and explosives. So there you go. Then we got the T55AD, basically exactly the same as the T55K1, except from you can see that the K1 actually has a machine gun where the T55AD doesn't, and the T55AD doesn't actually costs 5 points more, and you're not really getting much difference except from a stabilizer and a slightly better main gun with stabilizer on the T55AD, but you're getting a machine gun on the T55K1, and I would say a machine gun is a lot more effective for defending yourself against enemy infantry that may trying to find your CV. Also against helicopters that may fly straight over your command vehicle. If you don't have the machine gun to defend itself, then it could get sniped very easily at close range. For these smaller vehicles, it's not so much of an issue because they can move around quite fast, but for tanks, you definitely need a machine gun to defend itself if it's going to be sitting in forest, because the speed is just way too slow. So moving on to the SPW 50PU, same chassis as the Topaz, but it doesn't have the cannon or recoilless rifle that the Topaz has, just the machine gun. It's actually a lot slower as well. So if I basically hover over the Topaz, I can compare them. You can see that the Topaz has the 60 km/h speed, the SPW has 45 km/h speed, which is terrible for a command vehicle. It's not going to get anywhere. The autonomy is worse on the SPW 50PU, and obviously the machine gun is actually worse as well, with a worse rate of fire. However, the suppression is higher, so it may actually suppress units a lot quicker than the Topaz. But again, you've got this cannon on this one, which is going to deal a lot of damage at close range. Now, of course, this SPW50 costs 25 points less, but I would always recommend going for something that's a lot faster than 45 kilometers per hour. You never know how many times you're going to get caught out. Then we got the SPW60S. Now this has a speed of 80 kilometers per hour, another one of the faster command vehicles you can get your hands on. It comes with one of those 14.5mm machine guns, which is useful against enemy APCs that randomly find you, but not much else. It's only ever going to give away your position. You got a size of medium and optics of medium, so it might spot something that's coming, but not as easily as, for instance, the BRM-1K, which has the exceptional optics, which is really, really nice and definitely one of the most recommended units. But a very average unit for its cost, and of course, as ever, don't rely on the machine gun. Then we got the T-72. Basically, it's very similar to this K1, just at an East German variant. So, moving on to the PACT supply vehicles now, we are first looking at the Koloss. Now, these are Czech supply vehicles which have a fuel capacity of 1,500 litres. It has a speed of 80 kilometers per hour and a strength of 10. Doesn't have any armour, so will get taken out very easily and make a big boom. But again, it's decent for staying alive against nearby artillery fire because of its strength. It will always take damage, but it will always take enough that it will stay alive. You've got the upgraded version, the T815, which has an upgraded fuel capacity of 2,000 litres. But I would never recommend upgrading to this because you can get 4 of these trucks for the same price of 3 of these trucks. Now, it gives you the same fuel capacity, but having 4 of these trucks, 4 of the T813s, allows you to spread them out a lot more and keep them safer. Whereas if you're taking penalty by getting your T815s destroyed, then it's going to be a lot harsher on your points. Only a little bit harsher, but there's always a little bit of points, or sometimes games where a little bit always helps. So, then we're moving on to the Star 266 ZAOP. This has a 90 km per hour speed, so it's a lot faster, but has half the fuel capacity. So if you want to stick with supply vehicles that are cheap but carry less, then this is one of the ones you want to be going for. It's very fast. 90 kilometers per hour is 10 kilometers per hour faster than the Koloss, but for half the price it carries half less the fuel. I think that's perfectly fair. Then we have the VLKV. This has an 80 kilometers per hour speed, very, very similar to the Koloss, just the East German variant. Then we've got the Urals, the well-known Russian trucks. One has a 50 km per hour speed with only a 70 or 750 litre fuel capacity. If you're going to be taking a 750 litre fuel capacity, why don't you take the Star 266? Because it's 40 km per hour faster than the Urals. That's all I have to say there. Then we have the Ural 4320, which is 70 km per hour and has a fuel capacity of 1,250 litres. Now these are a lot more favourable because of their fuel capacity for their price. So for 30 points you're getting 250 more litres. For 40 points you're getting 500 more litres. But for 20 points you're getting 250 less litres. So sometimes these are worth bringing in. So it depends on how much risk reward you want and how much you're going to be spacing out your units. And also it depends a lot, if you're playing an all nations deck, what kind of heavy tanks you're using, what kind of armaments they use. For example, HGMs are very supply heavy, so you may need larger supply vehicles which carry more fuel. So it depends on the deck you're creating a lot of the time. And of course, if you just want a supply vehicle that will babysit a book for the entire game, you could just take a T815 Colossus, which has 2,000 litres fuel capacity, and it will probably keep the book resupplied for the entire game. Then we have the first of the supply helicopters. We've got the Mi-26, biggest helicopter in the game. Comes with 5,000 litres fuel capacity. But I must say, these have a huge target on them. They are massive, so they get spotted very easily. And as soon as they do, people try and shoot them down. And the reason for that is they cost 125 points. That's more than the command vehicles, or more than the helicopter command vehicles, at least. So you don't want to be losing one of these very easily. And yes, they have a 250 km/h speed, which isn't very fast for helicopters, mind you. But the only reason people use these is for the fuel capacity. And to be safe, if you're going to use these, make sure they're behind your front lines, and that they land behind your front lines, and then you send things back to it. Because otherwise, if you keep it at the front line, sometimes people are going to bring forward AA, so it can never take off. Sometimes it will never need to, because honestly, I believe it has half the fuel capacity of a FOB, so it's not going to run out of fuel that easily, depending on how much ammunition you're using, depending on units, like artillery, for example. It's good for supplying artillery if you don't want to bring in FOBs and keep your supply mobile. So yeah, there's always that to bear in mind. I'm not sure exactly how many you get if you put them on your deck. Obviously, it depends on the availability that you choose. But either way, useful for forward artillery positions, I would say, and for behind front line resupply. Then we got the Mi-2D, the first of the Russian command vehicles, or command helicopters, sorry. This is a very small vehicle, useful for hiding out in the open behind trees. We have medium optics and a speed of 220 km/h, which is not very fast at all, I must say. But it is faster than the Mi-4A with a speed of 180 km/h. Now, I would definitely recommend taking this small helicopter over the Mi-4A as your command vehicle any day, if you're going to be using helicopter command vehicles. Like I said in the NATO logistics vehicle video, helicopters are useful for defending, or basically capturing contested sectors quickly. So at the beginning of the game, you go and fly to a potentially contested sector very quickly and land in it, and then bring in reinforcements from that sector. You always put your command helicopters in places that can be used for reinforcements. Then you've got the very small size to back that up, so it's going to not be spotted as easily. But obviously it's got the same spot range as every other vehicle because of its poor stealth. But the Mi-4A, however, is a little bit bigger. And the speed is a lot slower, so it's not going to be as useful for the same role. Then we have the Mi-8 ZAOP, which is the second supply helicopter. Has a 2,000 litre fuel capacity and 230 km/h speed. So basically you're getting a Colossus in the sky, which can be relatively useful, but you're paying another 10 points on top of the Colossus. So you're not losing too many points for bringing in these kind of helicopters, but just bear in mind they're useful for completely different situations where your enemy may not have as much AA. And if you can identify that and you have these on your deck, then they become very, very useful. However, if you can't recognise that and you do have them on your deck anyway, then make sure that you keep them behind your front lines. Then you have obviously the East German variants, exactly the same. They're both big, they both have poor optics, and they both have a fuel capacity of 2,000 litres. Then of course we got the FOBs. Not really much to say about these, just depending on what your strategy is, you may not even have one on your deck. You may have one on your deck to resupply if you're using a lot of HGM units. If you're using a lot of artillery, then you may have 2 or 3 FOBs, but I would never recommend, in a 1v1 at least, taking more than 1 FOB. Also, for a lot of 1v1 strats, it's very useful not to have any at all, so maybe not even waste deck slots with an FOB. Has a strength of 20 though, and of course the fuel capacity of 10,000 litres. So that's a roundup of the PACT logistics vehicles. Hopefully this was useful. Thanks for the feedback on the last video. I hope I get as much back on this one. If you notice anything I've said wrong or anything that you have a different opinion about, then let me know in the comments, and I'm sure people who watch this video will like to see your comments too. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.